Join Christian apologist, Bible teacher, and expert on the Shroud of Turin, Dale Glover, in his new and exciting 4-part series which include Lecture 1, Intro to the Shroud of Turin and its images. Lecture 2, How were the Shroud images formed? Lecture 3, The Shroud's historical authenticity. And Lecture 4, Refuting Shroud skeptics, answering objections. You can now book Dale to speak or teach in person or virtually at your church, school, or organization. Dale was recently booked to virtually teach on the Shroud of Turin at the Oakwood Wesleyan Church in Toronto by Pastor Dr. Sewell Prince.
Basically, this is a long linen cloth. It's about 14 feet long by 3.5 feet wide. And it has both the front image and the back image of a man who appears to have been crucified. He has the nail wounds in the wrist and on the feet. As well, there are many bloodstains consistent with scourge wounds that seem to look like a Roman scourge weapon. There's also wounds on the forehead, on the head that represent the crown of thorns. And finally, there's a major wound right in the chest that looks like it's the result of a spear going through and piercing the heart. And interestingly, on the shroud, it's been studied, there is actually 2 separate fluids. There's blood and water, just like we learn in the Gospel of John. So on this basis, many scientists and experts have concluded that the images on the shroud represent Jesus Christ and that the cloth itself is the actual burial cloth mentioned in the Gospel.
Shroud Explorations is sponsored by Real Seeker Ministries and Podcast, which has featured host Dale Glover, interviewing some of the world's top Christian apologists, which would include Dr. William Lane Craig, Sean McDowell, Mike Licona, Craig Keener, Dr. Michael Brown and Dr. Gary Habermas to mention a few. Discover the world's greatest unsolved mystery in the Shroud of Turin with Dale Glover. Through Dale's in-depth teaching series you will discover several important things about the Shroud of Turin. First, you will discover how it is the most famous and studied artifact in Christian history. Secondly, you will discover that modern forensic science has proved that it is not a forgery but the actual burial cloth of a crucified man. And thirdly, you will discover how many Shroud skeptics have been converted to Christ as a result of the overwhelming new evidence for the Shroud being the actual burial cloth of Christ. Even renowned Christian historians like Dr. Gary Habermas from Liberty University puts the authenticity of the Shroud as high as 85%. The growing evidence for the Shroud of Turin in recent years has brought the awareness and interest in the Shroud into the forefront of the mainstream media. Many mainstream documentaries and stories have been featured on the Shroud of Turin which have included coverage from National Geographic, the History Channel, CNN, Fox News, BBC, NBC News, CBC News, USA Today, Daily Mail, and The Washington Post to mention a few. Luke 24 verse 12 documents that Peter rose and ran to the tomb, stooping and looking in, he saw the linen cloths by themselves, and went home marveling at what happened. Could the Shroud of Turin be the actual burial cloth of Jesus? To find out the answer to this important question and many more, please connect with Dale Glover today, to book him to speak or teach at your church, school, or organization on the Shroud of Turin or on other related topics which he has specialized in, such as the historical evidence for Jesus' resurrection, the Messianic prophecies, a new argument from unique circumstances, or the existence and attributes of God versus atheism.